Today, what I want to do is I want to show you how the wealthiest families throughout history have used one simple concept to become rich, but also to stay wealthy. And then I'm going to show you how you can use that exact same concept by changing just one thing and adding just one step to what you're already doing today. And the best part about this is this has been around for a long time. And another thing I want to do in today's video is I want to show you how this concept was brought to the masses like myself and you. This man's name was R. Nelson Nash, and he brought this concept through a book called Becoming Your Own Banker. And R. Nelson Nash pioneered something that the wealthiest families had used, but also he deemed this the infinite banking concepts. But he coined the process of taking back the banking functions in your life. And he called it Becoming Your Own Banker. And before we get into the history of this amazing financial concept, I think it's very important that you know a little bit about the man, R. Nelson Nash. And I'm gonna go right to page 12 in this book. And I would urge all of you to read Becoming Your Own Banker because this is the fundamentals. R. Nelson Nash was born in 1931 in Greene County, Georgia. He was in the Air Force and he spent a lot of time in forestry. But I want to just take a couple pieces of this book and I want you to really wrap your head around how R. Nelson Nash actually came up with this infinite banking concepts. So right here on page 12, R. Nelson Nash says a large portion of the root thought of this concept is coming from the study of forest finance. And he talks about how time is such an important thing in forestry. You think about it, you plant a seed, you serve that seed by watering it, giving it sun, and eventually that seed becomes a tree, and that tree over time becomes massive. Well, he talks about that and compares it to compounding interest. He says, dealing with compound interest over a long period of time with no taxation on the buildup, that's the key. He also points out that the reverse fact is that you must make an investment that you will not see any results for a long period of time, just like that tree. And he talks about how in the forestry world, you have to think many, many years into the future. But let me go a little bit further down. So imagine this. Your first granddaughter's born, and while visiting her, your house is burglarized and vandalized, and they wipe you out. A few short months after that, your 52-year-old brother dies unexpectedly from a heart attack. And then a couple months after that, your second granddaughter is born, but your second granddaughter has cancer. I mean, it feels like your life is spiraling out of control. And on top of that, you've been investing in real estate like you were taught, and you were told to leverage and borrow money for all this real estate, but interest rates skyrocket, but you got a $500,000 loan, and now the interest rate is over 23%, and you don't even know how you're going to make these new payments. This is exactly what happened to R. Nelson Nash, and it brought him to his knees, literally. Let me share. The basic idea revealed in the infinite banking concepts was born over a period of many, many months at 3 to 4 a.m. in the kneeling position, praying, Lord, please show me a way out of the financial nightmare that I've created for myself. And the answer came back like a baseball bat across the eyes. You are standing in the midst of everything it takes to get out, but you don't see it because you look at things like everybody else. That is how R. Nelson Nash came up with what you're going to hear. And this is where the imagination kicked in. Imagination is more important than knowledge. The infinite banking concept is an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. Let's look at the history of how this amazing concept was used by these wealthy families. I'm Chris Naugle, and this is What Now? What's next? You know, one of the things I hear a lot with the infinite banking concept is that sounds too good to be true. Or people think that this is some new concept, but this isn't new at all. This has been around for hundreds of years, and we have done extensive research on all the famous people in history who have been using this, have been using specially designed whole lives for this banking purpose. And really starting with one of the ones that we all have enjoyed is Walt Disney. And we did a lot of research on Walt Disney World, but Walt Disney in 1953 took a loan from his whole life policy to start Walt Disney World. So the funny thing is, when you look at Walt Disney World and all the beautiful things that Walt Disney has created, it all started with a loan from his whole life policy. And you have to then also understand that why did he use a loan to start Disney World? Well, it's quite simple. No one else would give him the money. He got turned down by every single bank and he had no money. So there wasn't a banker that would lend him money, but he was the bank and he realized that. So he took a loan from his bank to start Disneyland. So as we continue on this journey into history and we look at other people that have used the infinite banking concept, we arrive at James Cash Penney, commonly known as J.C. Penney. You might know it as, in its prime, J.C. Penney department stores. In its prime, they had 840 locations in 49 U.S. states. It wasn't just a small company, it was a massive company. And then when you really look at the history of J.C. Penney, you have to understand that J.C. Penney hit some hard times during the Great Depression. And during the Great Depression, a lot of people went bankrupt. Tons of businesses lost their businesses, went bankrupt, and they just had to walk away from their dream. But you see, J.C. Penney didn't walk away from his dream because he had a whole life policy that he took loans from to keep his daily, day-to-day expenses going, to make his payroll for his employees, and that is how he made it through the Great Depression. And then, in its heyday, J.C. Penney became a monstrous company. And he did that and maintained that company by using his whole life insurance by taking loans in these hard times. You see, one of the interesting takeaways of this is whole life insurance is one of the tried and tested places to put money. Even during Great Depressions, he was still able to access his cash value, which was unchanged, which didn't lose money like everything else, and it didn't go bankrupt. These giant mutually owned insurance companies, like the one J.C. Penney used, they're tried and tested, sound financial institutions, and J.C. Penney proves that. So I hope you're enjoying this video, and I'm going to urge you to use your imagination, and let's just practice. Right here in front of me is a button. It says subscribe. Oh, it actually says that. Hit that subscribe button, and right above there's a little bell. Smash. Whoa. Smash that bell, and you will be notified every time I put new concepts out. You okay? All right, let's keep going. So now we got to take this trip back in history a little bit further, back to the 1800s, and somebody that we all know, and that person is the Rockefellers. You've heard of the Rockefeller fortunes, you've heard of the Rockefellers, and you probably have heard of John D. Rockefeller. Now, John D. Rockefeller was one of the wealthiest men of his times, and the Rockefeller family is still one of the most wealthy families out there. So how did they do it? How did they make it through all this? Now, a lot of people would say a lot of things, but here's the thing. The Rockefellers, together with other wealthy families of that time, understood, they always understood, that dividend-paying whole life insurance policies allowed them to grow their money, use their wealth to fund other ventures, protect their assets, and most importantly, create multi-generational wealth. And it protected future generations. You see, when the Rockefellers had all this money, it wasn't about making more money, it was about keeping and protecting the money they had. And where did they turn? Well, they turned to giant mutually owned insurance companies because they were the safest place to park their money. Some people would say that the Rockefellers, along with other families like the Rothschilds, started the banking concepts that we know today. And one of the other things that they definitely can be quoted with is starting family privatized banking systems. They did this by using the same thing we use, which is called infinite banking. On our journey through history, we arrived to the 1960s. And in the 1960s, there was a restaurant called McDonald's that was founded by the McDonald's brothers. But then comes along Ray Kroc. And this is one of my favorite stories about the infinite banking concept. You see, Ray Kroc bought out the partners, the McDonald's brothers, and took McDonald's to where it is today. But that didn't come without some financial struggles. You see, Ronald McDonald, the character in the marketing campaign, would have never happened without Ray Kroc taking loans from his 2 whole life policies to make that campaign work. And it's well documented that Ray Kroc also took loans from his whole life policies to cover employees' salaries during these difficult times of growth. If Ronald McDonald and McDonald's, the restaurant chain, used whole life insurance, well, how can this be too good to be true? I mean, this is well documented, and we've done all the research on this to show that this is how it's been used throughout history. And Ronald McDonald wouldn't have been what it is today without whole life insurance. So one of my favorite investors is a man by the name of Warren Buffett. You all know Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. And Warren Buffett's a huge fan of insurance companies. And it goes so much as saying that in 2010, Buffett said this. He claimed that purchasing Berkshire Hathaway was the biggest investment mistake he ever made. And he claimed that it denied him compound investment returns of about $200 billion over a subsequent 45 years. Buffett claimed that if he had invested that money directly in insurance businesses, instead of buying out Berkshire Hathaway, due to what he perceived as a slight by an individual, of course he says that, those investments would have paid off several hundred-fold. So if Warren Buffett loves insurance companies, why is it that we're not taught to use insurance companies? Continuing on our journey through history, we stop at Pampered Chef. Many of you know Pampered Chef. It was created in the 1980s by Doris Christopher. Well, Pampered Chef was started by taking a loan from her whole life insurance policy. She took a $3,000 loan to start her new kitchenware company. Back then, it was just her dream, but that kitchen company grew to be a multi-billion-dollar company that was purchased by none other than Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway paid $1.5 billion for that company that was started with a $3,000 loan from Doris Christopher's whole life policy. Again, you start to see the power of this concept. And as we wrap up the history and we come to more modern times, there's a lot of other people that use this system that are very well known, but let's just hit on two politicians. I'm not big into politics, but Senator John McCain, before he passed, had said that he financed his presidential bid by using his life insurance policy as collateral. But then go one step further and look at the current running mate, Vice President Joe Biden, and he went public and said on his financial disclosures, Biden showed that he used his Mass Mutual whole life policy and backed it up as collateral to fund his campaign. These are two politicians, two very, very wealthy individuals using whole life insurance in a very systematic way, just like we keep talking about for the infinite banking concept. It makes you wonder why people would ever think this sounds too good to be true when so many people throughout history have used this. So when I learned this information many, many years ago and started applying it to fix my money problems, during that period, I realized that I had to help other people do this. It just wasn't fair that I had this knowledge and other people didn't. So I felt it was my obligation to go out and teach people and mentor people on how this works. And along with that, I got the title of being America's #1 money mentor. And that comes with major commitments. Those commitments are, I now have to go out there and help all of America learn how to take back control of their money, learn how to get all the money back for all the purchases that they're ever going to make in their lifetime. And I also have to do that knowing that I'm going to make significantly less money doing it this way, because this is the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts. So in this documentary, we showed you the history of the infinite banking concept, the greats that have used this, the wealthy that have used this, and now we're bringing this down to how do you use this? So we've covered a lot of topics, but there's still going to be a lot of questions. It's a brand new concept, one that you've never heard before. So we need to answer those questions, and I've got a great resource. You can go right to my website, which is Chris Naugle, Naugle. And in that resources tab, there's also a link where you can schedule a time to talk to me, and we can talk about your money problems and how we can solve them using the infinite banking concept. I hope you enjoyed this documentary in learning about the history of the infinite banking concept. Now it's time for you to decide, what does the future look like for you? So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I urge you to read this book, Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. But the important thing, again, to understand is this process is simply a process of you taking back the banking functions in your life. It's eliminating your dependence on the banks, and it all involves you taking control and becoming your own bank. Hey, and if you like this video and you want to get started with the infinite banking concepts, check this video out right here. How to get started with infinite banking. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for joining.